I'm joined at the Roundtable by Dr. Jim Dekker. Jim's been a longtime friend of mine, and he teaches at North Park University, where he's the Associate Professor of Youth Ministry. Hey, what have been the tough times in your life? Maybe you were a teenager and you went through a really tough spot. How did you make it through? So often in youth ministry circles, we talk about hurting teens and teens in pain. We almost, if we're not careful, think that teens just give up. They fall down, they cave under the pressure of the hurt and of the sorrow in their lives. And yet that's not the case. Many teens make it through those tough spots. They form what Jim talks about today at the table, resilience. They have that special quality about them that can make it through. Let's join Jim at the Roundtable as he teaches us today about resilience. Hi, welcome to another episode of the Roundtable. I'm here with Dr. Jim Dekker from North Park University, and we're just sitting here chatting. Jim, thanks for making a drive from Chicago here to Remedy Live. That's really cool of you. And we almost dressed alike, not quite, but yeah. Hey, tell us a little bit about what you do at North Park, your ministry history, and even your family.
Right now I'm an associate professor of youth ministry at North Park. I've been there 10 years, originally from Ontario. So nice. Go Canada.
Go Canada.
Go Canada. I've been married for 25 years. Have two awesome daughters, 24 and 22, Rebecca and Hannah.
And a dog.
And a dog,
yeah.
Chica. Chica's awesome. But yeah, living on the north side of Chicago and enjoying it.
You're near Wrigley Field.
Yes, near Wrigley. That could be good or bad.
That could be good or bad, great. Well, we've been friends for a while. I just appreciate you being on the Roundtable, and I know you've done a lot of research and teaching. You stay connected, and this one research project that you've been doing lately has me intrigued. And you've talked about this word. I don't want to tease it, but the word resilience. And let's tell me what that means.
Yeah. Wow, resilience. A basic definition is the ability to bounce back after a bad situation. The technical terms refer to being able to excel and even go beyond what one would normally do in a difficult situation, which is most often cave. And so people are studying how well people move past adversity.
Just people in general, and certainly could be a study for youth workers who have to show resilience to hang in there year after year. Yes. But you're talking specifically, and this is where it connects to us in youth ministry, is the area of resilience and youth. Yes. And so what did you do? What did you do as a part of this research?
Well, this research project came out of an experience I had in Alaska. Some people in the Evangelical Covenant Church asked me to come to Alaska to speak for youth pastors. And this was Bush, Alaska. So we are flying wild Alaska to no man's land and spending time with young people there. And before I went, I studied what are the issues among young people in Bush, Alaska. And I came up with time and time again sexual abuse, physical abuse, substance abuse, horrible things happening to these young people. And when I got there, I discovered people who were excited about life, who had a real rhythm for life. And that just struck me as odd, because if these people were dealing with this stuff, you'd expect something worse. So I thought there was some kind of chemistry that was making them strong.
So they had, these things were actually happening, this hurt, these hurtful, abusive situations, and yet there was a happiness, as you said.
Some success in life.
Yeah.
I know of people who just wouldn't even pass high school. They wouldn't graduate had they been in the things that these young people had been in. Now, that's not the case for all, but for some, there was a magic. Ann Maston calls it a magic. Resilience is a magic. And when I met some of these young people who were excelling, I thought, there's something going on here. And if a youth pastor could actually see that magic happen for young people going through difficult times, we need to be able to foster that. That's sort of our task as a youth pastor.
So by magic, they mean like something that's unexplainable. They don't necessarily mean that there's some like David Copperfield moment going on there or anything like that. No. So you dove in, you studied resilience, and what were some of the things that came out of your study?
Well, what I discovered was that we had all these social psychologists looking at young people just excelling out of difficult, horrible circumstances, and they discovered several factors that were common for people that expressed resilience. And those factors were, they had meaningful participation in a community, there was high expectations placed on them, They had caring support from non-parental adult role models. They had bonding circumstances in the community.
A positive
bonding
with an adult.
Right, with other adults. They had clear and consistent boundaries. Usually it was related to the struggles that they were facing, but there were clear and consistent boundaries. And finally, one was life skills. The leaders and the people around these resilient young people were being fed into them life skills. And so when I brought those ideas to Alaska with me and started looking at these young people who excelled and expressed resilience, I saw so many opportunities for youth pastors to step into that.
So what have been some of the things now as you've brought that out of that part of Alaska and you've drawn your findings and now you're looking at North American context? What are some of the ways we can foster that, facilitate that? How would you describe that?
Right. Well, what I would recommend is for youth pastors to pay attention to those elements that were common for people who are resilient and think of our programming and think of what we do during the year. How do we build pro-social relationships with non-parental adult role models? How do we give young people opportunities to really see themselves as significant contributors to a community? So they're not just carrying the collection plate, they're actually a part of an embedded system of life and community, and that they have a role to play that's a significant role. So you start to see different opportunities for young people, and as you begin to develop those opportunities for them, they will grow in their resilience.
So most of us are familiar with You Lost Me and Sticky Faith and all of the orange and everything. Sure. How does what you've found connect and intersect with them, maybe even nuance what they've been doing?
Right. Well, again, I would suggest that a lot of the concern for young people going off to college and losing the faith or going away from the church might have to do with these components of how much has the community embraced them as a significant contributor? How much does the community expect young people to play a continuing role? One thing that was really powerful in the literature was that resilient young people had a part in the history of the community. So when the elders of the community were talking about the history of the church, or in Bush, Alaska, the history of their village, young people were encouraged to participate in that history. And they became the keepers of that story.
Interesting.
And so that's where resilience began to rise up. These young people could face all kinds of garbage in their life, but they were the keepers of the story of the community. So when we think of youth ministry for Sticky Faith, how are they keepers of the story of the Christian faith?
Interesting. Keepers, not just participants.
Yes,
yeah, that's a different even level than what some of us think of.
Right, right.
Yeah, was there a role that hope played in any of this? Did you come across that?
Yeah.
So I hear that when you're talking.
Right, yeah, a lot of hope, and that excites me. I know myself and my family too, we've been through some tough times. And in those tough times, it's hard to have hope. But when I think of the difficult times we went through, people who had these elements, they really had expectations, caring support, they would instill hope. They would give us a picture of the future. In a lot of the classes I teach, I talk about identity, significance, and purpose. And purpose is that thing that says, I can be somewhere in a year.
Right.
What is that going to look like? And how can I believe in that? Yeah. Now, as youth pastors, to speak theologically into that, to say, God has a place for you a year from now. And that's powerful. And I believe you can get there. Let's go together. That's great.
You mentioned theology there. You've drawn this, I think, obviously knowing you, that probably have some scriptural support for some of this thinking as you've tried to draw this out. What have you found?
What I've discovered is not only is this happening in the observations of literature in the secular world, but when I read scripture, when I look at Job, when I look at Hebrews 12, that great passage of the faithful, enduring incredible suffering and being such a testimony of the gospel. And then I'm drawn right directly to Romans 5, 1-5, where suffering produces these incredible character traits within a person that looks so Christ-like that the typical youth pastor looking at a young person struggling would try to fix it or try to get them out of that. But if we start to think, how can we walk with you through that with these elements so that these Christ-like characters come out? I mean, we're living Scripture at that point. That's not to say about the whole character of Christ himself. And we are to walk with Christ in his suffering, so that somehow, as Paul says, to attain the resurrection.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you do any work, before we wrap up here, did you do any work with developmental assets from Search Institute?
Yes.
Did you draw some parallels there? We may not be familiar with that, so could you tell us a little bit about those and then how they connected?
Well, the Search Institute in Minnesota, Minneapolis, they observed elements that are important for a life to grow and develop in a healthy way. And they found 40 of these, and they're divided out in various fashions, internal and external assets. And they observed that when certain combinations or in combination, these things produce strengths in the lives of young people. That fed into the resilience literature. In fact, it was really fun to watch the Search Institute's work come out in the literature that I was reading, and then to see some of the literature in youth ministry talking about the 40 assets, but not using this notion of resilience. And so I'm just bringing these things together, and the 40 assets is a great place to start.
Yeah, I heard those as you were talking, so
Yes.
I wanted to ask that. Well, I think resilience is an interesting characteristic for us to think about with our youth, that perhaps there's more going on with them than what meets the eye initially, and to look for ways that they're able to, in the same way we all have at some point, work through difficult times and come out for the better at the end. We just think sometimes, they're going to flop and, as you said, cave and under the pressure and everything.
It's not necessary.
Good. Thanks, Jim, for coming by the Roundtable, making the drive from Chicago. We appreciate it. Wasn't that a great challenge from Jim today, talking about the area of resilience? You know, we're in youth ministry because we care about kids and we want them to do well. And Jim says that resilience is a skill that can be learned. What are you and I doing to foster resilience? Do we teach? Do we lead? Do we work with teens in a way where we're helping them become more resilient? Or are we enabling them to become more dependent on us? Are we enabling them to live in this Tylenol society where we just have quick fixes? Listen, a lot of life can't be fixed quickly. You know that, and I know that. And so as we work with teens in pain, we don't want to just, and we're not always able to just fix what they're going through, but we need to learn how to sit with them, enter into their struggle. A phrase I use often is just go sit in the mud with people who hurt. Presence means more than words many times. Thanks, Jim, for being a part of the Roundtable, and thank you for joining us today. You can email the show at roundtable@youthspecialties.com, and we'll see you next episode at the YS Roundtable.